In the unforgiving wilderness of the Arizona Territory in 1882, where the sun scorched the earth mercilessly and survival depended on split-second decisions, a single act of human kindness would bridge two worlds that had been at war for generations. This is the true story of how a worn cotton shirt became the thread that wove together the fates of a weathered cowboy and an Apache woman, proving that sometimes the smallest gestures can echo through eternity. When hatred runs as deep as canyon walls and trust is scarcer than water in the desert, it takes extraordinary courage to see beyond the color of skin and the weight of history. What happened that day near Skeleton Creek would challenge everything both communities believed about their enemies, and show that the human heart knows no boundaries when compassion calls. This is not just a story of the Old West, it's a testament to the power of one moment, one choice, one gentle gesture that changed two lives forever. The Arizona sun hung like a merciless coin in the bleached sky, casting harsh shadows across the rocky terrain where Samuel Sam Clayton guided his horse along the narrow trail. The year was 1882, and the territory was still a place where a man's life could end as quickly as a rattlesnake strike. Sam had been riding fence for the Doubler Ranch for nearly 8 years, and he knew these hills like the lines on his weathered hands. At 34, Sam was lean and sun-darkened, with steel-gray eyes that had seen too much violence and not enough kindness. His horse, a steady bay mare named Belle, picked her way carefully between the scattered boulders and thorny mesquite bushes. The only sounds were the soft thud of hooves on packed earth and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Sam's mind wandered to the task at hand. Ranch owner Dutch Robbins had sent him to check the eastern fence line near Skeleton Creek, where cattle rustlers had been cutting wire and stealing stock. It was dangerous work, especially this close to Apache territory. The uneasy peace that existed between the white settlers and the Apache tribes could shatter like glass at any moment. As Belle rounded a bend in the trail, Sam's attention was caught by something unusual near the base of a towering red rock formation. At first, he thought it might be a wounded animal, but as he drew closer, his blood ran cold. There, huddled against the rocks, was a young Apache woman. Sam's hand instinctively moved to the Colt revolver at his hip, but something stopped him from drawing the weapon. The woman appeared to be injured, and she posed no immediate threat. Her long black hair was matted with dried blood, and her traditional buckskin dress was torn and stained with dirt and what looked like more blood. He dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible and moving with deliberate care. The woman's dark eyes followed his every movement, alert despite her obvious pain. She couldn't have been more than 25 years old, with high cheekbones and skin the color of burnished copper. Even in her injured state, there was a dignity about her that commanded respect. "Easy there," Sam said quietly, using the same tone he would with a frightened horse. "I'm not going to hurt you." The woman didn't respond, but her eyes never left his face. Sam could see that she was trying to assess whether he was friend or enemy. In this land, that distinction often meant the difference between life and death. As he got closer, Sam could see the extent of her injuries. There was a deep gash on her forehead that had bled considerably, and her left arm hung at an odd angle, suggesting it might be broken or severely sprained. Her breathing was shallow and labored, and there were other cuts and bruises visible on her exposed skin. Sam's mind raced as he tried to figure out what had happened to her. Had she been attacked by bandits? Wild animals? Or perhaps there had been some kind of conflict within her own tribe? In these troubled times, violence could come from any direction. "Water," he said, pointing to his canteen. "Agua." He wasn't sure if she spoke English or Spanish, but water was a universal need in this harsh landscape. The woman's eyes flicked to the canteen, and Sam could see the desperate thirst in her expression. Moving slowly, he uncorked the container and held it out to her. When she didn't move to take it, he realized that her injuries might prevent her from reaching for it. Stepping closer, Sam knelt down beside her and carefully tilted the canteen to her lips. The woman drank greedily, water spilling down her chin and onto her torn dress. As she drank, Sam noticed that she was shivering despite the intense heat of the day. Shock, he realized. She was going into shock from her injuries and the trauma of whatever had happened to her. "What happened to you?" Sam asked softly, though he didn't expect an answer. To his surprise, the woman spoke. Her English was accented but clear.
Horse, fell down mountain. 3 days walking.
Her voice was hoarse from thirst and exhaustion, but Sam could hear the intelligence behind her words. 3 days in this desert without proper water or food would be enough to kill most people. The fact that she had survived spoke to her remarkable strength and determination.
3 days? Sam repeated, looking around at the unforgiving landscape. You've been walking for 3 days?
The woman nodded weakly.
Looking for water. Got lost.
Sam felt a pang of sympathy for her plight. He had been lost in this desert before, and he knew the terror of not knowing which direction led to safety. The sun could drive a person mad, and the lack of water would kill them slowly and cruelly. "My name's Sam," he said, touching his chest. "What's yours?" The woman hesitated for a moment, as if deciding whether to trust him with even that basic information.
Finally, she whispered, "Ayana." Means eternal blossom. Sam nodded respectfully.
It was a beautiful name, and it seemed to suit her despite her current condition.
"Well, Ayana, you're in pretty bad shape. I need to get you some help." Fear flashed in Ayana's dark eyes. "No town. They kill Apache." Sam understood her concern.
The relationship between the white settlers and the Apache people had been strained to the breaking point by years of conflict, misunderstanding, and mutual mistrust. If he took her to the nearest town, she would likely face hostility at best, and violence at worst. Not the town, Sam assured her.
"I know a place. A ranch. The boss is a fair man." Ayana shook her head weakly. "Apache not welcome." Sam studied her face, seeing the pain and exhaustion etched in every line.
This woman needed medical attention, and she needed it soon. If he left her here, she would almost certainly die from her injuries or from exposure. But if he tried to help her, he would be putting both of them at risk. The smart thing to do would be to give her his water and, right away, let her fate be her own responsibility. That's what most men in his position would do. The Apache and the white settlers were enemies, after all. Why should he risk his own life for someone who belonged to a tribe that had been raiding ranches and killing settlers? But, as Sam looked into Ayana's eyes, he couldn't bring himself to abandon her. There was something about her courage in the face of death, her dignity despite her desperate circumstances, that spoke to something deep inside him. She was a human being in need of help, and that was all that mattered. The sun was beginning to sink toward the western horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and orange. Night would bring cold temperatures and even greater danger. If he was going to help her, he needed to act quickly. "Listen to me," Sam said, his voice firm but kind. "You're going to die if you stay out here. I can help you, but you have to trust me." Ayana's eyes searched his face for a long moment, and Sam had the feeling that she was looking into his very soul, trying to determine whether he was a man of his word. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her, because she gave a small nod. "I trust you, Sam Clayton," she said quietly. Sam was surprised that she knew his full name, but then, he remembered that the Apache were skilled scouts and observers. They probably knew more about the local ranchers and settlers than the white men realized. The problem now was how to transport her safely. Ayana's injuries made it impossible for her to ride alone, and putting her on Belle's back behind him would be both painful for her and potentially dangerous if she lost consciousness and fell. Sam looked around the area, trying to come up with a solution. His gaze fell on some fallen branches from a dead mesquite tree, and an idea began to form. He could construct a simple travois, a type of stretcher that could be dragged behind his horse. It wouldn't be comfortable, but it would be safer than trying to carry her on horseback. "I'm going to make something to carry you," he explained to Ayana. "It might hurt a little, but it's the best way to get you out of here." Ayana nodded her understanding, though Sam could see that she was struggling to stay conscious. He needed to work quickly. Using his knife and some rope from his saddlebags, Sam began constructing a crude but functional travois. He cut 2 long, straight branches and lashed them together with crosspieces to form a basic frame. Then, he spread his spare blanket across the frame to create a surface for Ayana to lie on. As he worked, Sam found himself stealing glances at his patient.
Even injured and exhausted, there was something compelling about her.
She watched his efforts with intelligent eyes, occasionally offering quiet suggestions that showed she understood what he was trying to accomplish. "You've done this before," she observed when he began securing the travois to Belle's saddle.
Sam nodded. "Had to carry an injured calf once. Same principle."
Despite her pain, Ayanna managed a small smile.
"Comparing me to a calf?" Sam felt his face redden. "I didn't mean, that is, I wasn't trying to."
"Is okay," Ayanna said softly.
"You help me. That is what matters."
With the travois completed, Sam faced the delicate task of moving Ayanna onto it without causing her additional pain. Her injured arm made any movement difficult, and he could see that she was fighting against waves of pain and dizziness. "This is going to hurt," he warned her. "Pain is nothing new," Ayanna replied with quiet stoicism. Sam slipped his arms under her carefully, lifting her as gently as possible. She was lighter than he had expected, and he could feel the heat of fever beginning to develop in her body.
Time was running out.
As he placed her on the travois, Ayanna gasped in pain and grabbed his arm with her good hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone in her condition. Where are you taking me?" she asked. "The Double R Ranch," Sam replied.
"It's about 10 miles from here. The owner's name is Dutch Robbins.
He's a decent man, and his wife Clara knows something about doctoring."
Ayanna's eyes showed her continued fear and uncertainty. "And if they will not help Apache woman?" Sam met her gaze steadily. "Then, I'll find someone who will."
There was something in his tone that seemed to convince her, because she relaxed slightly and released her grip on his arm. Sam covered her with another blanket to protect her from the cool evening air that was already beginning to settle over the desert. As they began the long journey toward the ranch, Sam couldn't help but wonder what he had gotten himself into. He was a cowboy, not a doctor, and he was risking his job and possibly his life to help a woman whose people were considered enemies by most of the white settlers in the territory. But, as Belle pulled the travois steadily across the rocky ground, and as he listened to Ayanna's quiet breathing behind him, Sam knew that he had made the right choice. In a land where violence and hatred seemed to rule the day, perhaps a single act of kindness could make a difference. The desert was beginning to cool as the sun sank lower, and stars were starting to appear in the darkening sky. It would be a long night, but Sam was determined to see it through. Behind him, Ayanna had fallen into an exhausted sleep, trusting him completely with her life. For the first time in years, Sam felt that he was doing something truly important. Something that might matter long after the fences were mended and the cattle were counted. As Belle's hooves carried them steadily toward an uncertain future, Sam couldn't know that this moment would change both their lives forever. The Double R Ranch sprawled across a valley between two low mesas, its buildings silhouetted against the star-filled sky when Sam finally guided Belle through the main gate. The ranch house was a substantial adobe structure with a wide porch wrapped around three sides, and warm yellow light spilled from its windows into the cool night air. Several smaller buildings dotted the property: bunkhouses, a barn, corrals, and various sheds and storage buildings.
Sam's arrival had been noticed.
Dutch Robbins emerged from the main house, a lantern in his hand and a worried expression on his weathered face. At 62, Dutch was a big man with silver hair and kind blue eyes that had seen both the best and worst that the frontier had to offer. He had built the Double R from nothing, and his reputation for fairness had earned him respect from both his employees and his neighbors.
"Sam? That you, boy?" Dutch called out as he approached.
We were starting to worry.
"You've been gone since."
Dutch's words trailed off as the lantern light revealed what Sam was pulling behind his horse. The sight of the travois and its unconscious occupant stopped the older man in his tracks. "Good Lord," Dutch breathed, raising the lantern higher to get a better look.
"Sam, what in tarnation have you got there?"
Sam dismounted wearily, his legs stiff from the long ride.
"Her name's Ayanna. Apache.
Found her hurt and alone near Skeleton Creek. She's been walking in the desert for 3 days." Dutch moved closer to examine the woman on the travois, his face grave. As a rancher in Apache territory, he had seen the results of violence between the two peoples too many times. But he had also seen enough of life to know that suffering was suffering, regardless of who was doing the suffering.
Apache, you say? Dutch murmured, kneeling beside the travois. How bad is she hurt?
Head wound, broken arm, maybe some internal injuries, Sam replied. She's running a fever now, and she hasn't had proper food or water in days. Dutch was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing the situation.
Taking in an injured Apache woman was not without risks.
If word got out, it could bring trouble from both the military and from neighboring ranchers who might see it as harboring the enemy. The front door of the house opened, and Clara Robbins stepped onto the porch. At 58, she was still a handsome woman with graying brown hair and gentle eyes that reflected the same kind spirit as her husband. She had been a schoolteacher back in Missouri before she and Dutch had headed west to build their life together.
Dutch? What's going on out there? Clara called. Clara, we've got an injured woman here, Dutch replied. Apache woman.
Sam found her in the desert.
Clara didn't hesitate.
She hurried down the porch steps, her medical knowledge taking precedence over any other considerations. As the nearest thing to a doctor for miles around, she had treated everything from broken bones to gunshot wounds. Bring her inside, Clara said briskly, examining Ayanna in the lantern light. She needs to be warmed up and properly examined.
How long has she been unconscious? On and off for the last few hours, Sam answered.
She was awake when I found her, but she's been getting weaker. Dutch and Sam carefully lifted the travois and carried it toward the house, with Clara leading the way. As they maneuvered through the front door, Sam couldn't help but notice the concerned faces of the ranch hands who had gathered on the porch. Word would spread quickly among the men, and he wondered what their reaction would be. Inside, the main room of the house was warm and welcoming, furnished with handmade furniture and decorated with Clara's needlework and a few precious books. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Put her in the spare room, Clara directed, already gathering medical supplies from a cabinet. Dutch, I'll need hot water and clean towels.
Sam, help me get her onto the bed.
The spare room was small but comfortable, with a narrow bed covered by one of Clara's hand-stitched quilts. As they transferred Ayanna from the travois to the bed, she stirred and opened her eyes, looking around in confusion and fear. It's all right, Clara said gently, her voice taking on the soothing tone she had once used with frightened children.
You're safe now. My name is Clara, and I'm going to help you.
Ayanna's eyes found Sam's face, and some of the fear left her expression.
Sam?
I'm here, he assured her.
This is the ranch I told you about. These are good people.
Clara began her examination, her experienced hands gentle but thorough. Years of frontier life had given her considerable medical knowledge, and she had delivered babies, set broken bones, and treated various injuries and illnesses. The head wound isn't as bad as it looks, Clara announced after cleaning away the dried blood. Head wounds always bleed a lot, but it's not deep enough to be dangerous. The arm is definitely broken, though, and she's dehydrated and exhausted.
Dutch returned with a basin of hot water and an armload of clean towels.
He also brought a bottle of whiskey, which served as both antiseptic and painkiller in these circumstances.
What do you need us to do? Dutch asked his wife.
I need to set that broken arm, and she's going to need fluids and rest, Clara replied.
Sam, you should get some food and sleep. You look about ready to drop. Sam hesitated. I'd like to stay, if it's all right. At least until she's stable. Clara smiled at him.
Of course. But first, go clean up and get something to eat. You won't do her any good if you collapse. Reluctantly, Sam left the room and made his way to the kitchen, where the cook, an elderly Mexican man named Felipe, was keeping a pot of stew warm. Felipe had worked for the Double R for over a decade, and his loyalty to the Robbins family was absolute. Senor Sam, Felipe said, ladling stew into a bowl.
Is true what they say? Apache woman? It's true, Sam replied, accepting the bowl gratefully. She was hurt and alone. Couldn't just leave her out there. Felipe nodded approvingly. Is right thing. God sees all hearts, not just color of skin.
As Sam ate, he could hear Clara's voice from the spare room, speaking quietly to Ayanna as she worked. The sound was oddly comforting, and he realized that for the first time in hours, he was beginning to relax. After finishing his meal, Sam stepped out onto the porch for some fresh air. The night was clear and cold, with a brilliant canopy of stars stretching from horizon to horizon. In the distance, he could hear the lowing of cattle and the occasional yip of a coyote.
Sam.
Dutch's voice came from the shadows at the end of the porch.
Sam turned to see his boss approaching with 2 cups of coffee.
Dutch handed him one and leaned against the porch railing. "Hell of a thing you did today," Dutch said quietly.
Not many men would have taken that risk. Couldn't leave her out there to die, Sam replied. Wouldn't be right.
Dutch sipped his coffee thoughtfully.
You know this could cause us problems. Some folks in town aren't going to understand. I know, Sam said. If you want me to move on, I'll understand.
Dutch was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the star-filled sky. You know, when Clara and I first came west, we had all kinds of ideas about what we'd find out here.
Most of them were wrong.
This land doesn't care what color a man's skin is or what tribe he comes from.
It'll kill you just the same if you're not careful.
He paused, taking another sip of coffee. What I've learned is that there are 2 kinds of people in this world: those who'll help a fellow human being when they're down, and those who won't.
I'd rather have the first kind working for me.
Sam felt a weight lift from his shoulders.
So I still have a job? Dutch smiled. Son, after what you did today, you've got a job here for as long as you want it.
The 2 men stood in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the night. Inside the house, Clara was still working, and Sam found himself wondering about the woman he had rescued. What kind of life had she lived? What had brought her to that lonely spot in the desert? Clara says she'll probably be all right, Dutch said, as if reading his thoughts. The arm will take time to heal, but she's young and strong.
Question is, what happens after that?
It was a good question, and one that Sam hadn't fully considered. Ayanna couldn't stay at the ranch indefinitely, but returning her to her people might not be simple either. The Apache tribes were scattered and often in conflict with both the military and civilian authorities. One thing at a time, Sam said finally. First, she has to get well.
Dutch nodded. Clara will see to that.
That woman has a gift for healing, I swear.
As if summoned by their conversation, Clara appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel.
She looked tired but satisfied.
How is she? Sam asked immediately.
Sleeping, Clara replied.
The arm is set and splinted.
I gave her some laudanum for the pain. What she needs most now is rest and proper food.
Will she be all right?
Dutch asked.
Clara smiled. She's stronger than she looks.
The fever should break by morning, and then, it's just a matter of letting her body heal.
Sam felt relief flood through him. Can I see her?
Just for a moment, Clara said. She needs her rest.
Sam followed Clara back into the spare room, moving quietly so as not to disturb the sleeping woman.
Ayanna looked small and fragile in the big bed, her injured arm immobilized in a crude but effective splint. Her breathing was deep and regular, and some color had returned to her cheeks. She's lucky you found her when you did, Clara whispered. Another day in the desert might have been too much. As they watched, Ayanna stirred slightly in her sleep, murmuring something in her native language. Her face, relaxed in sleep, looked younger and more vulnerable than it had when she was awake and wary.
What do we tell the men? Sam asked quietly.
Clara and Dutch exchanged glances. It was Dutch who answered.
We tell them the truth. We're helping an injured person.
Anyone who has a problem with that can find work elsewhere.
Some of them might not understand, Clara added.
There's been so much violence and mistrust on both sides.
Sam nodded.
He knew that several of the ranch hands had lost friends or family members in various conflicts with Apache raiding parties. The cycle of revenge and retaliation had been going on for so long that many people had forgotten what had started it. "We'll deal with that when we have to," Dutch said firmly. "Right now, our job is to help this young woman get back on her feet." As they prepared to leave the room, Ayana's eyes fluttered open. She looked around in confusion for a moment before her gaze settled on Sam. "Sam," she whispered. "Still here?" "I'm here," he assured her. "You're safe now. These people are going to take good care of you." Ayana's eyes moved to Clara and Dutch, studying their faces carefully. Whatever she saw there seemed to reassure her, because she relaxed slightly. "Thank you," she said simply, the words directed at all three of them. "Rest now," Clara said gently. "Everything else can wait until morning." Ayana's eyes drifted closed again, and, within moments, she was sleeping peacefully. The three of them stood watching her for a moment longer before quietly leaving the room. Outside, Sam found himself reluctant to return to the bunkhouse. The events of the day had left him emotionally drained but somehow energized at the same time. He had made a choice that would affect not only his own life but the lives of others as well. "Thank you," he said to Dutch and Clara. "Both of you. For trusting me, and for helping her." Clara reached out and squeezed his arm. "You did the right thing, Sam. Sometimes that's all any of us can do." As Sam finally made his way to the bunkhouse, he could feel the eyes of the other ranch hands on him. Word had indeed spread about their unexpected guest, and he could sense the mixture of curiosity, concern, and uncertainty among the men. The bunkhouse was a long, low building with a dozen beds arranged along the walls. Most of the men were already asleep, but a few were still awake, talking quietly among themselves. The conversation stopped when Sam entered. "Sam," called out Jake Morrison, a grizzled cowboy who had been with the ranch almost as long as Sam had. "Heard you brought in some company." "That's right," Sam replied, settling onto his bunk. "Apache woman. Found her hurt in the desert." There was a moment of silence, and Sam could feel the tension in the room. Finally, a young cowboy named Billy Peters spoke up. "Apache killed my cousin over in New Mexico," Billy said, his voice tight with anger. "How do we know she ain't a scout or something?" "Because she's got a broken arm and she's barely alive," Sam replied calmly. "And because leaving someone to die in the desert isn't what decent people do." "Decent people," scoffed another voice from the shadows. "Since when are Apache decent people?" Sam sat up straighter, his own anger beginning to rise. Since when did it matter what tribe someone belongs to when they're hurt and need help? "Easy, boys," Jake Morrison said, his voice carrying the authority of his years. Sam did what he thought was right. "Dutch and Clara are taking care of the situation." "That's good enough for me." There were a few grumbles from some of the men, but most seemed willing to accept Jake's judgment. As the conversation died down and the men settled in for the night, Sam found himself staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. He thought about Ayana, lying in the spare room with her broken arm and her quiet dignity. He thought about the fear in her eyes when she talked about going to town, and the way that fear had been replaced by trust when he promised to help her. In a land where violence and hatred seemed to be the norm, perhaps small acts of kindness were more important than anyone realized. Perhaps they were the only things that could bridge the vast gulf of misunderstanding between people who had been taught to see each other as enemies. As sleep finally began to claim him, Sam made a silent promise to himself and to the woman sleeping in the ranch house. Whatever happened next, he would see this through. He would make sure that Ayana had a chance to heal, and a chance to find her way back to her people safely. It was a promise that would test his courage, his loyalty, and his beliefs in ways he couldn't imagine. But it was a promise he was determined to keep, no matter what the cost. The morning sun painted the desert in shades of gold and red as Sam made his way across the ranch yard toward the main house. He had awakened before dawn, unable to shake his concern for Ayana. The night had passed without incident, but he knew that the real challenges were just beginning. Clara was already in the kitchen, preparing a tray of food when Sam knocked on the back door. She looked up with a tired but pleased expression as she let him in.
How is she? Sam asked immediately. Much better, Clara replied, adding a cup of steaming coffee to the tray. The fever broke around midnight, and she's been sleeping peacefully since then. She woke up about an hour ago asking for water. Sam felt relief wash over him. Can I see her?
Of course. In fact, she asked about you specifically.
I think your presence would be comforting to her.
Clara led the way to the spare room, carrying the breakfast tray.
As they entered, Sam saw that Ayanna was indeed looking much better.
She was sitting up in bed, her back supported by pillows, and, though her face still showed signs of her ordeal, her dark eyes were clear and alert.
Good morning, Clara said cheerfully, setting the tray on a small table beside the bed. I brought you some breakfast, and someone who's been worried about you.
Ayanna's gaze moved to Sam, and a small smile crossed her features.
Sam. You look like man who did not sleep well. Sam managed a rueful grin. Had some things on my mind. How are you feeling? Better, Ayanna replied honestly. Arm still hurts, but not like yesterday.
This woman, she indicated Clara, has healing hands.
Clara blushed slightly at the compliment. It's nothing special.
Just some basic medical knowledge and common sense.
Is more than that, Ayanna insisted.
My grandmother had healing hands.
I know when I see them. As Clara helped Ayanna with her breakfast, Sam noticed how carefully the Apache woman observed everything around her.
Her eyes took in every detail of the room, from the handmade quilt to the small cross hanging on the wall. She was clearly trying to understand these people who had taken her in. Sam tells us you were walking in the desert for 3 days, Clara said gently.
Where were you trying to go? Ayanna hesitated for a moment before answering.
My people moved to new camp near the mountains. My horse fell, and I became lost trying to find them.
These mountains? Sam asked, pointing toward the eastern window where the Dragoon Mountains were visible in the distance.
Yes. But now I do not know exactly where.
Could be anywhere in those hills. Clara and Sam exchanged glances. The Dragoon Mountains covered hundreds of square miles of rough terrain. Finding a mobile Apache camp would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. What about your family? Clara asked. Won't they be looking for you?
A shadow crossed Ayanna's face.
My husband died in the winter. Sickness. I live with my brother now, but he thinks I stayed behind with my cousin's family. He will not know I am missing for many days.
The sadness in her voice touched Sam deeply. Here was a woman who had lost her husband, nearly lost her own life, and now faced the prospect of being separated from her tribe indefinitely.
We'll figure something out, Sam said firmly. Once you're strong enough, we'll find a way to get you back to your people.
Ayanna looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and skepticism.
Is dangerous for you to help Apache woman? I understand if you cannot. We've come this far, Sam replied. We're not going to abandon you now. Clara nodded in agreement.
You're welcome to stay here as long as you need to recover. Your arm will need several weeks to heal properly.
But what will you tell people? Ayanna asked. If word spreads that you harbor Apache.
It was a legitimate concern, and one that had kept Sam awake much of the night. Anti-Apache sentiment ran high in the territory, fueled by years of conflict and mutual mistrust. If certain people learned about Ayanna's presence at the ranch, it could mean trouble for everyone involved.
Let us worry about that, Clara said firmly. Right now, your job is to get well.
A knock at the front door interrupted their conversation. Clara excused herself to answer it, leaving Sam and Ayanna alone. Through the thin walls, they could hear voices in the main room, though the words were indistinct. Sam, Ayanna said quietly, you have done much for me.
More than I could ask. But I do not want to bring danger to these good people.
You're not bringing danger, Sam assured her.
Sometimes helping someone is worth the risk. Ayanna studied his face carefully. Why do you help me? Apache and white men are enemies. It was a question Sam had been asking himself since the moment he first saw her by the rocks. Maybe that's exactly why, he said finally. Maybe somebody needs to break the cycle.
Before Ayana could respond, Clara returned to the room, her face troubled.
Who was at the door? Sam asked.
Tom Bradley from the next ranch over, Clara replied.
He was asking about tracks he found on his land yesterday. Apache tracks, he thinks. Sam felt his stomach tighten.
Bradley was known for his hostile attitude toward all Native Americans, and he had a reputation for taking the law into his own hands.
What did you tell him? Sam asked. The truth.
That we haven't seen any Apache on our land. Clara's emphasis on the word "our" was slight but meaningful. Technically, Ayana was inside the house, not on the land.
Did he believe you? Ayana asked, her voice tense. Clara hesitated.
I'm not sure. He seemed suspicious about something, but he didn't push the matter. Sam stood up, his mind racing. If Bradley was tracking Apache sign, he might decide to search the area more thoroughly. If he brought others with him, or if he contacted the military, the situation could become dangerous very quickly. Maybe I should take her away from here, Sam said.
Find somewhere else.
No, Dutch's voice came from the doorway.
He entered the room with a determined expression on his weathered face. We're not going to be run off our own land by Tom Bradley or anyone else.
But, Dutch, Clara began, if he brings others.
Then, we'll deal with that when it happens, Dutch interrupted. This woman is hurt and needs help. That's all there is to it.
Ayana looked from one face to another, clearly struggling with the knowledge that her presence was creating problems for the people who had helped her.
I can go, she said quietly. Arm is better. I can travel.
Your arm is broken, Clara said firmly.
You're not going anywhere until it's healed. Clara's right, Sam added. Besides, where would you go? You said yourself you don't know exactly where your people are.
Dutch pulled up a chair and sat down, his expression thoughtful.
Let me ask you something, young lady. How many people know you're missing? Ayana considered the question carefully.
My brother, when he discovers I did not arrive at Cousin's camp.
Perhaps Cousin's family, when they realize I never came. And, when would that be?
Brother said he would visit Cousin in 1 moon.
Maybe 2 weeks from now. Dutch nodded slowly.
So we have some time before anyone comes looking for you specifically.
What are you thinking? Clara asked her husband.
I'm thinking that if Miss Ayana is willing, she could help us with some of the household work while her arm heals. Nothing strenuous, mind you, but there's plenty she could do one-handed.
Sam understood immediately what Dutch was suggesting.
If Ayana was working around the ranch, she would have a legitimate reason to be there. It would also give her something to do besides worry about her situation.
Is good idea, Ayana said, warming to the suggestion. I can cook, clean, mend clothes. My people believe in paying debts. Clara smiled.
It would be nice to have another woman around the place.
And Felipe could use some help in the kitchen during busy times.
The arrangement seemed to satisfy everyone, but Sam was still concerned about the larger problem. Tom Bradley wasn't the type to let suspicious circumstances go uninvestigated, and if he started asking questions in town, word would eventually reach the wrong ears.
What about Bradley? Sam asked. Dutch's expression hardened.
Tom Bradley has been trying to cause trouble for this ranch ever since I refused to sell him water rights 3 years ago. If he wants to make something of this, he'll have to deal with me. There was steel in the older man's voice, and Sam was reminded that Dutch Robbins hadn't built the double R by backing down from confrontations. In the meantime, Dutch continued, we carry on as normal.
Miss Ayana, if you're feeling up to it, Clara can show you around the place later.
Help you get familiar with the layout.
Ayana nodded eagerly. I would like that very much. As they discussed the practical arrangements for Ayana's stay, Sam found himself watching her face.
Despite everything she had been through, there was a resilience about her that impressed him. She was adapting to an impossible situation with grace and dignity. "Sam," Dutch said, drawing his attention back to the conversation, "I want you to write out and check that fence line you were supposed to inspect yesterday. But keep your eyes open for any sign of Bradley or his men." "Will do," Sam replied, though he was reluctant to leave Ayanna so soon. As if sensing his hesitation, Ayanna spoke up. "Go do your work, Sam. I will be safe here." Clara nodded in agreement. "I'll take good care of her. You don't need to worry." After breakfast, Sam prepared to ride out, but he found himself lingering near the house. The rational part of his mind told him that Ayanna would be fine with Clara and Dutch, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he should stay close.
"Sam."
Ayanna's voice came from behind him. He turned to see her standing in the kitchen doorway, having insisted on helping Clara clean up despite her injured arm. She had borrowed one of Clara's dresses, and, though it was a bit too large for her smaller frame, she looked more like herself again. "I wanted to thank you again," she said, stepping closer. "Not just for saving my life, but for treating me like a person. Like someone who matters." "You do matter," Sam replied without hesitation. Ayanna smiled, and, for the first time since he had found her, Sam saw a glimpse of what she must have been like before tragedy and hardship had marked her life. "When I was walking in the desert," she said quietly, "I thought about what my grandmother used to say. She believed that sometimes the spirits put people in our path for a reason. Maybe this is one of those times." Sam felt something shift inside him at her words. "Maybe it is," he agreed. As he finally rode out to check the fence line, Sam found himself thinking about what Ayanna had said. Perhaps there was more to their meeting than simple chance. Perhaps, in a land torn apart by conflict and misunderstanding, they had been given an opportunity to build something different. The fence inspection took most of the morning, and Sam was relieved to find no signs of tampering or theft. But, as he worked, he noticed riders in the distance, 3 men heading in the general direction of the Double R. Even from a distance, he recognized Tom Bradley's distinctive black horse. Sam finished his work quickly and headed back toward the ranch at a gallop. If Bradley was coming with others, he wanted to be there to help deal with whatever trouble might arise. He arrived at the ranch just as Bradley and his 2 companions were riding into the yard. Dutch was already on the porch, Clara beside him, and Sam could see that both were prepared for trouble. "Afternoon, Tom," Dutch said coolly as the 3 men dismounted. "What brings you by?" Bradley was a thin, sharp-faced man with cold gray eyes and a permanently suspicious expression. His companions were typical frontier toughs, hired guns more than cowboys. "Heard you might have had some Apache visitors," Bradley said without preamble. "Thought I'd better check on my neighbor's welfare." "Appreciate the concern," Dutch replied, his tone making it clear that the concern was neither needed nor wanted. "But, as you can see, we're doing just fine." Bradley's eyes swept the ranch buildings, clearly looking for any sign of an Apache presence. Sam dismounted and moved closer to the porch, his hand resting casually near his sidearm. "Mind if we take a look around?" Bradley asked. "Just to be sure everything's secure." "As a matter of fact, I do mind," Dutch said firmly. "This is private property, and you're not welcome here." Bradley's face darkened with anger. "Now see here, Dutch. If you're harboring Apache, that makes you an enemy of every decent white person in this territory." "The only enemy I see," Dutch replied calmly, "is a man who comes onto my land making accusations without proof." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sam could see that Bradley's companions were nervous, their hands moving toward their weapons. One wrong word or sudden move could trigger a gunfight. "You're making a mistake, Robbins," Bradley said, his voice low and threatening. "If I find out you've been helping Apache, I'll see to it that every rancher in the territory knows about it." "Is that a threat, Tom?" Dutch asked, stepping down from the porch. Before Bradley could answer, the kitchen door opened and Ayanna stepped outside, carrying a basket of laundry. She had apparently heard the confrontation and decided to show herself rather than hide. The effect was immediate and electric. Bradley's eyes widened with shock and rage, and his hand dropped to his gun. "Well, I'll be damned," he breathed.
You are harboring Apache. The moment hung suspended like a drop of water about to fall. Everything that happened next would depend on split-second decisions and the courage of good people faced with hatred and fear. Sam's hand was already moving toward his gun when Ayanna spoke, her voice calm and clear in the tense silence. I am not Apache, she said, meeting Bradley's shocked gaze steadily. I am Mexicana. Maria Gonzalez. I work for Senora Robbins. It was a desperate gambit, but delivered with such calm conviction that even Sam almost believed it. Ayanna's features could certainly pass for Mexican, and her slight accent could be interpreted either way. Bradley stared at her suspiciously. Mexican, huh? Where you from? Sonora, Ayanna replied without hesitation. My family sent me north to find work. Clara stepped forward, playing her part perfectly. Maria came to us last week looking for employment. She's been helping with the housework and cooking. Bradley was clearly struggling with this unexpected development. He had been so certain he had caught the Robbins family harboring an Apache that he hadn't considered any alternative explanation. You sure she's Mexican? He asked Dutch. I'm sure she's none of your business, Dutch replied coldly. Now I'll ask you again to leave my property. For a moment, it looked like Bradley might push the confrontation further. But, faced with four determined people and uncertain about Ayanna's true identity, he apparently decided that discretion was the better part of valor. This isn't over, Robbins, he said, remounting his horse. I'll be watching you. You do that, Tom, Dutch replied. Just make sure you do it from your own land. As Bradley and his men rode away, Sam felt his knees go weak with relief. The confrontation had come far too close to violence for his comfort. Quick thinking, he said to Ayanna as the riders disappeared from view. Was necessary, she replied simply. Sometimes truth must wear different clothes to survive. Clara put a protective arm around Ayanna's shoulders. Are you all right, dear? I know that must have been frightening. I have faced worse things than angry men, Ayanna said with quiet dignity. But, I am grateful for your protection. Dutch shook his head grimly. That was too close. Bradley may not be entirely convinced, but he'll be back. And, next time he might bring the sheriff or the military. It was true, and they all knew it. The brief confrontation had bought them some time, but it had also made their situation more precarious. Bradley would be watching them now, looking for any excuse to cause trouble. What do we do now? Sam asked. Dutch was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face thoughtful. We carry on, he said finally. And we hope that common decency will win out over prejudice and fear. It was a hope that would be tested in the days to come, as word of the confrontation spread through the territory and more people began to take notice of the Double Ranch and its mysterious new employee. But, for now, at least, they had bought themselves some breathing room. As they walked back toward the house, Sam found himself walking beside Ayanna. Maria Gonzalez, he asked quietly. She smiled slightly. Was my grandmother's name. She always said it might be useful someday. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She was. She also said that sometimes we must become what we need to be in order to survive. Sam pondered those words as they entered the house. In a land where survival often depended on the color of one's skin or the language one spoke, perhaps Ayanna's grandmother had understood something important about the nature of identity and adaptation. But Sam also knew that even the cleverest disguise couldn't hold forever. Sooner or later, they would have to find a way to get Ayanna safely back to her people. And, until that happened, they would all be walking a tightrope between truth and deception, safety and danger, in a territory where the wrong choice could mean the difference between life and death. 2 weeks had passed since the confrontation with Tom Bradley, and an uneasy routine had settled over the Double Ranch. Ayanna, now known to all outsiders as Maria Gonzalez, had proven herself to be an invaluable addition to the household. Despite her injured arm, she worked tirelessly alongside Clara, helping with cooking, cleaning, and mending. Her quiet efficiency and gentle nature had won over even the most skeptical of the ranch hands.
Sam found himself spending more time around the main house, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. He told himself it was simple concern for Ayana's welfare, but he was beginning to suspect it was something deeper than that. On this particular evening, Sam was sitting on the porch steps, cleaning his rifle and watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and purple. Ayana emerged from the house carrying a cup of coffee, moving carefully to protect her still healing arm. "Thought you might like this," she said, settling beside him on the steps.
"Thank you," Sam replied, accepting the cup gratefully. The evening was cooling off, and the hot coffee felt good.
They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the colors fade from the sky and listening to the distant sounds of cattle and nightbirds. It had become a routine for them, these quiet moments at the end of the day when the work was done and they could simply exist without the weight of their complicated circumstances.
"How's the arm feeling?" Sam asked.
Ayana flexed her fingers carefully.
"Better each day. Clara says the bone is healing well."
"That's good news." Sam paused, then asked the question that had been on his mind for days.
"Have you thought about what you'll do when it's fully healed?" Ayana was quiet for a long moment. "I think about it often. But I do not know the answer."
It was an honest response, and Sam appreciated her candor. The truth was that Ayana's situation had become increasingly complicated as the weeks passed. Her disguise as a Mexican domestic worker was holding, but it was a precarious solution at best. "I've been thinking," Sam said carefully.
"Maybe we could find your brother's camp.
I know the mountains pretty well, and if we could get a general idea of where they might be."
"Is dangerous for you," Ayana interrupted.
"If Apache warriors see white men approaching camp, they might shoot first and ask questions later." Sam knew she was right, but he also knew that they couldn't maintain the current situation indefinitely. Sooner or later, someone would see through Ayana's disguise, or Tom Bradley would find some excuse to cause more trouble. "There might be another way," Ayana said thoughtfully.
"In 3 days, it will be the new moon. Good time for traveling unseen."
"If I could get to the old trading post near Skeleton Rocks, I might find someone who knows where my people have gone."
"Skeleton Rocks?" Sam frowned.
"That's more than 20 miles from here, and it's rough country. You'd never make it alone, especially with a healing arm."
"Then, maybe I do not make it," Ayana said with quiet acceptance. "But staying here brings danger to good people. Cannot do that forever."
Sam felt something tighten in his chest at her words. The thought of Ayana leaving the ranch, possibly never to be seen again, was more disturbing than he wanted to admit. "We'll find another way," he said firmly.
"There has to be something."
Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses.
In the gathering darkness, Sam could see 3 riders approaching the ranch at a steady pace.
His hand moved instinctively to his sidearm as he stood up.
"Go inside," he told Ayana quietly. "Just in case."
But before she could move, Dutch's voice called out from inside the house.
"Sam? Who's coming?" "3 riders," Sam called back. "Can't make them out in this light."
Dutch emerged from the house, rifle in hand, just as the riders came into the circle of light cast by the porch lanterns. To everyone's relief, the lead rider was Sheriff Jake Morrison, an honest lawman who had served the territory faithfully for over a decade. With him were 2 deputies Sam didn't recognize.
"Evening, Dutch," Morrison called out as he dismounted. "Sorry to bother you so late."
"No bother, Jake," Dutch replied, though his tone was cautious.
"What brings you out this way?"
Morrison was a grizzled man in his 50s, with tired eyes that had seen too much violence and injustice. He approached the porch with the careful movements of someone who had learned to be ready for trouble at any moment.
"Had some reports about Apache activity in the area," Morrison said. "Thought I'd better check with the local ranchers, make sure everyone's safe." Sam felt Ayana tense beside him.
She hadn't moved to go inside as he had suggested, and now it was too late to do so without drawing attention. "We haven't seen any Apache," Dutch said truthfully.
"Been quiet around here lately."
Morrison's gaze swept the porch, taking in Sam and, then, settling on Ayana. Sam held his breath, wondering if the sheriff would recognize her for what she really was. "Don't believe I've met your hired help," Morrison said politely. "This is Maria Gonzalez," Clara said, emerging from the house to stand beside her husband. "She's been helping me with the household work." Morrison touched his hat brim respectfully.
"Ma'am. You folks treating you well?"
"Si, senor," Ayana replied, her accent flawless. "Very good people, these." Morrison nodded and turned his attention back to Dutch.
"The reason I'm here is that Tom Bradley came to see me yesterday.
Claims he's been tracking Apache sign all over this area." "Tom Bradley sees Apache sign in his own shadow," Dutch replied dryly.
Morrison smiled slightly. "Can't say I disagree with you there. But he's stirring up folks in town, talking about organizing patrols and such. Thought you should know." Sam felt his stomach clench.
The last thing they needed was a group of armed civilians combing the area looking for Apache. "Jake," Dutch said seriously, "you know I've always been straight with you. If there was any real danger around here, I'd be the first to let you know." Morrison studied Dutch's face for a long moment. "I believe you would, Dutch. Question is, would you know danger if you saw it?" It was a pointed question, and Sam wondered if the sheriff suspected more than he was letting on. Morrison was known for his intelligence and attention to detail.
"What do you mean by that?"
Dutch asked. "Well," Morrison said slowly, "sometimes folks get themselves into situations where they think they're doing the right thing, but they might be putting themselves and others at risk without realizing it." The sheriff's words hung in the air like a challenge. Sam found himself holding his breath, wondering if Morrison was giving them some kind of warning. "Jake," Dutch said after a moment, "if you've got something to say, I'd appreciate you saying it straight out." Morrison was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving from face to face. Finally, he spoke, his voice carefully neutral. "There's been talk that maybe some folks around here might be sympathetic to Apache troubles.
Might even be inclined to help if they came across someone in need." "And what's wrong with helping someone in need?" Clara asked, her voice carrying a slight edge.
"Nothing at all, ma'am," Morrison replied.
"Helping folks is what decent people do.
But sometimes the line between helping and harboring can get a little blurry, especially when there are folks like Tom Bradley looking for reasons to cause trouble." Sam realized that the sheriff was trying to warn them without directly acknowledging what he suspected. Morrison was a good man caught in an impossible situation, trying to uphold the law while also protecting people he respected. "We appreciate the warning, Jake," Dutch said carefully. "And we appreciate you taking the time to come out here yourself instead of just taking Tom Bradley's word for things."
Morrison nodded.
"That's what neighbors do for each other." He glanced around the group one more time before preparing to mount his horse. "You folks take care of yourselves. And if you need anything at all, don't hesitate to send word." As the sheriff and his deputies rode away, the group on the porch stood in tense silence. Finally, Dutch spoke. "Well, that was interesting." "He knows," Sam said quietly. "Maybe," Dutch replied. "But he's giving us the benefit of the doubt." Ayana spoke for the first time since the sheriff's departure. "He is good man. But he is right about danger. Bradley will not give up." Clara put a protective arm around Ayana's shoulders. "Let us worry about Tom Bradley." But Sam could see that the sheriff's visit had shaken Ayana deeply. The reminder that her presence at the ranch was putting others at risk was clearly weighing on her mind. Later that evening, after the others had gone to bed, Sam found Ayana sitting alone on the porch, staring out at the star-filled sky. She looked small and vulnerable in the moonlight, and Sam felt his heart go out to her. "Can't sleep?" he asked, settling beside her on the wooden steps. "Too much thinking," she replied. "Sheriff was trying to help, but his words reminded me of truth I have been trying to ignore." "What truth is that?" Ayana turned to look at him, her dark eyes reflecting the starlight. "That I cannot stay here forever. That every day I remain brings more danger to people who had shown me only kindness." Sam wanted to argue with her, to tell her that everything would work out somehow, but he knew she was right.
The situation was becoming more precarious with each passing day. "There has to be another way," he said finally. "Maybe there is," Ayanna said thoughtfully. "I have been thinking about something Sheriff Morrison said. About the line between helping and harboring." "What do you mean?" Ayanna was quiet for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. "What if I was not being harbored? What if I chose to leave on my own, and someone happened to be traveling in the same direction?"
Sam frowned, trying to understand what she was suggesting.
"You mean?"
"I mean that you found injured woman and helped her get well.
Now she decides to travel north to find work in other towns. If Cowboy happens to be riding same direction on ranch business."
Sam began to see the logic in her thinking. If they could make it appear that Ayanna was leaving of her own accord, and if he happened to encounter her on the trail and decide to offer assistance, it might provide them both with a plausible story.
"It could work," Sam said slowly. "But where would you really be going?"
"To find my people," Ayanna replied simply.
"With or without help, I must try." Sam felt a sudden surge of determination. "Not without help. If you're going to do this, I'm going with you." "Sam, no. Is too dangerous for you? If Apache find white man with Apache woman, they might think you are trying to kidnap me."
"Then, we'll have to make sure they understand the truth," Sam said firmly.
"I'm not letting you go out there alone."
Ayanna studied his face in the moonlight, as if trying to understand what motivated his determination to help her.
"Why?" she asked simply. "Why do you risk so much for Apache woman you barely know?"
It was a question Sam had been asking himself for weeks, and he still wasn't sure he had a complete answer. But, looking at Ayanna in the starlight, seeing the courage and dignity she had maintained despite everything she had been through, he knew at least part of the truth.
"Because it's the right thing to do," he said. "And because I care about what happens to you."
The words hung between them and the cool night air, carrying more weight than Sam had intended. He saw something change in Ayanna's expression, a softening that spoke of understanding and, perhaps, something deeper.
"You are a good man, Sam Clayton," she said quietly. "But good men should not die for Apache woman's troubles." "Maybe not," Sam replied.
"But sometimes a man has to take a stand for what he believes in, regardless of the consequences." They sat in silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts.
Finally, Ayanna spoke again. "If we do this thing, we must plan carefully. One mistake could mean death for both of us."
"Then, we'd better not make any mistakes," Sam said with more confidence than he felt. As they began to discuss the details of their plan, Sam couldn't help but wonder if he was making the right choice. The rational part of his mind told him that he was risking everything for a woman he had known for only a few weeks, a woman whose people were considered enemies by most of the white population. But, as he looked at Ayanna, saw the hope beginning to return to her eyes for the first time in days, he knew that rational thinking had nothing to do with it. Sometimes a man had to follow his heart, even when his head told him he was being a fool. The plan they worked out was simple but risky. In 2 days, when the moon would be dark, Ayanna would slip away from the ranch in the early morning hours. She would take one of the horses and ride north, as if heading for the next town to look for work. Sam would wait several hours, then follow under the pretense of checking on some cattle that had been reported missing in that area. Once they were well away from the ranch, they would travel together toward the trading post at Skeleton Rocks, where Ayanna hoped to find news of her brother's whereabouts. From there, they would attempt to locate her people and reunite her with her tribe. It was a plan that depended on luck, timing, and the hope that they could avoid the various dangers that waited in the wilderness between the ranch and their destination. But it was better than waiting for Tom Bradley or someone like him to expose Ayanna's true identity. As they finalized the details of their escape plan, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to embark on a journey that would change both their lives forever. Whether the change would be for better or worse remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: in a land where hatred and fear too often ruled the day, they were about to take a stand for something different. Something that spoke to the better angels of human nature, even if it meant risking everything in the process. The gentle gesture that had begun with a simple act of kindness beside a rock formation in the desert was about to become something much larger, a test of courage, faith, and the belief that people from different worlds could find common ground if they had the courage to look for it. As the stars wheeled overhead and the desert night settled around them, Sam and Ayanna made their final preparations for a journey that would take them far from the safety of the double or ranch and into an uncertain future where the only thing they could count on was each other. The pre-dawn darkness was complete when Ayanna slipped quietly from the ranch house, carrying only a small bundle of supplies and wearing the simple traveling clothes Clara had given her. Her arm, though still tender, had healed enough to allow her to ride, and her heart was heavy with both hope and sorrow as she made her way to the corral where Sam had left a gentle mare named Star ready for her journey. 3 hours later, as the sun painted the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold, Sam followed her trail northward under the pretense of searching for strayed cattle. Dutch and Clara had said their goodbyes the night before, understanding that this departure had to appear natural and unplanned. Clara had pressed a small leather pouch into Ayanna's hands, containing herbs and medicines that might prove useful on the journey ahead. Sam caught up with Ayanna at a predetermined spot near Willow Creek, about 15 miles from the ranch. She was watering Star at the creek's edge, and she looked up with relief when she heard Belle's hoofbeats approaching. "Any trouble?" Sam asked as he dismounted. "No one followed," Ayanna replied. "You told Dutch I was tracking those missing steers. Gave me a reason to be away from the ranch for several days." They rode together through the morning, following game trails and dry washes that would hide their passage from casual observation. The landscape was harsh but beautiful, with towering red rock formations and valleys filled with sagebrush and ocotillo. In the distance, the Dragoon Mountains rose like ancient guardians against the blue sky. As they traveled, Ayanna shared stories of her people and their connection to this land. She pointed out landmarks that held special meaning in Apache tradition, and explained how her ancestors had survived in this seemingly barren wilderness for countless generations. "My grandmother used to say that the desert only appears empty to those who do not know how to see," Ayanna said as they paused to rest the horses in the shade of a large boulder. "Every rock, every plant, every creature has its purpose." Sam found himself fascinated by her knowledge of the land. She could read signs in the earth that were invisible to him, and she knew which plants could provide water or food in an emergency. It was a completely different way of understanding the world, one that spoke of deep connection and respect for the natural environment. By afternoon, they had reached the foothills of the mountains, and the going became more difficult. The terrain was rocky and steep, with narrow trails that tested both their riding skills and their horses' endurance. But Ayanna seemed to grow more confident with each mile, as if the familiar landscape was giving her strength. As the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, they spotted the trading post at Skeleton Rocks in the valley below. It was a ramshackle collection of adobe buildings clustered around a natural spring, serving as a meeting place for travelers, traders, and anyone else who needed supplies or information in this remote corner of the territory. "Looks quiet," Sam observed, studying the post through his spyglass. "Good," Ayanna replied. "Fewer people means fewer questions." They made camp in a hidden canyon about a mile from the trading post, planning to approach it separately the next morning. Sam would go first, posing as a cowboy looking for stray cattle, while Ayanna would arrive later as a Mexican woman seeking work or passage to other settlements. As they prepared their simple supper over a small, smokeless fire, Sam found himself studying Ayanna's face in the flickering light. The weeks at the ranch had been good for her. She had gained back the weight she had lost during her ordeal in the desert, and the constant strain had faded from her features. But now, as they drew closer to potentially finding her people, he could see new tensions arising. "Are you nervous?" he asked. Ayanna considered the question carefully. "Yes, but not about finding my people. I am nervous about what happens after." "What do you mean?" She was quiet for a moment, stirring the fire with a stick. "My brother thinks I am dead by now. When he sees me alive, there will be questions. Where have I been? Who helped me? What will I tell him?" Sam hadn't fully considered this aspect of their mission. Apache society, like most tribal cultures, had strict rules about interaction with outsiders, especially during times of conflict.
Ayana's prolonged stay with white ranchers could be seen as suspicious or even treacherous by some members of her tribe.
"You'll tell him the truth," Sam said finally.
"That you were injured and some decent people helped you get well. And if he asks why white people would help Apache woman? What if he thinks I gave away tribal secrets in return for protection?"
Sam could hear the real fear in her voice now. She wasn't just worried about finding her people, she was worried about whether they would accept her back after her time among their enemies. "We'll figure it out when we get there," Sam said, though he knew his words provided little comfort.
"Your brother knows you. He'll understand that you would never betray your people." Ayana nodded, but Sam could see that she wasn't entirely convinced.
As they settled down for the night, taking turns standing watch, he found himself wondering if they were walking into a situation that could prove dangerous for both of them. The next morning dawned clear and cool, with a light breeze that carried the scent of pine from the higher elevations.
Sam rode down to the trading post just after sunrise, playing his role as a searching cowboy.
The post was run by a weathered old Mexican named Carlos Mendez, who had been trading with various Native American tribes for over 20 years. "Buenos dias, señor," Carlos greeted him as Sam tied Bell to the hitching post.
"What brings you to my humble establishment?" "Looking for some stray cattle," Sam replied, accepting a cup of strong coffee from the trader. "Black cattle with the double R brand. You seen anything like that around here?" Carlos shook his head. "No cattle, amigo. But I have seen many other things in recent days. Apache hunting parties passing through, searching for good winter campsites." Sam's pulse quickened. "Apache? How recently?"
3, maybe 4 days ago. Small group, maybe 8 or 10 warriors. They traded for some ammunition and coffee."
"You know which direction they were heading?"
Carlos studied Sam's face carefully.
"Why you want to know, cowboy? You hunting Apache or cattle?" Sam realized he had shown too much interest.
"Just want to make sure I don't ride into trouble while I'm looking for those steers." "See, is wise to be careful," Carlos agreed.
They went north, toward the high country near Eagle Peak. Peaceful trading, but...
He shrugged expressively. An hour later, Ayana arrived at the trading post, having transformed herself once again into Maria Gonzalez, the Mexican domestic worker. She spoke with Carlos in rapid Spanish, explaining that she was looking for work or transportation to settlements further north. Sam watched from a distance as Carlos questioned her, clearly trying to determine if she was trustworthy. Finally, the old trader see me.